Welcome to Craft, Design, Edit, Sleep, Repeat with hosts Lisa Conway and Nikki Jensen. Listen as we take a deep dive into the business of fiber craft design. Please check out the show notes at arcticedits.com for lots of links that we just didn't get a chance to talk about. Hey, Nikki, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. You have a special guest with us today. You want to introduce us?
Yes, we're here with Kirsten Jordan, who is a social media marketing wizard. She works with small businesses um, and helps them strategize social media. And she has an awesome Instagram profile with lots and lots of tips. Welcome, Kirsten.
Oh, thanks so much, Nikki. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm thrilled to meet you, Kirsten. Is
Nice
it
to meet you
Kirsten or
too.
Kristen?
It's Kirsten, but I
Kirsten.
probably get a lot of Kristens and Kirstens, and sometimes I even get called by my last name. And usually I'm pretty lenient with like mistakes around my name, but if somebody calls me Jordan, I'm like, yeah, that's not my first name.
Well, welcome. Could you please explain to me your background? Tell me
Mhm.
about yourself and what you do.
So, as Nikki mentioned, for the last number of years, I think since 2018, when Nikki and I first crossed paths, I've been working with smaller businesses, predominantly in my local community, which is Toronto, and helping them with their social media presences. So, usually I work with businesses in a couple of ways. One is more on figuring out, what is a good social media strategy. And then I'm entering the world of coaching because I do believe that from a small business perspective, when you learn to do things yourself, it becomes a lot less confusing. And you're like, actually, this isn't too hard. I see you nodding, Lisa. Maybe it's the same in your world. When you actually take the time to learn, you're like, oh, it's not really that magical what happens behind the scenes in the social media world. I just need to hit some buttons and figure out how to do some things myself. So I work with businesses in that way as well.
I can definitely relate to the idea of wanting to learn it myself so I understand it
Mm-hmm.
and understanding where you can hand off those pieces to other people. And
Mm-hmm.
as businesses grow, sometimes it's beneficial to know how to do something if you have to, but it's also beneficial to know this isn't something I need to be putting my time into. This is
Mm-hmm.
something I can actually hire someone out for. That point where you don't have to be hands-on for a very small business that's usually just yourself.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting what you just mentioned. In the beginning, I think that for a lot of small businesses, they would love to outsource social media. It is a bit of a headache for most people who probably are tuning into this. You probably would rather be doing other things than figuring out what to post and what to post when, and figuring out that nasty algorithm that all of us hate so much. And I know we'll get into a little bit. But I do truly believe, even if eventually you do see yourself outsourcing, different aspects of your social media, you should learn still a little bit about how to do it yourself. And one of the reasons I believe this is that, usually behind a small business is somebody who's really passionate about what they do and why they created their business. And one of the things that I say to my clients who, I still have a couple that I work with and I do their content, but I always say, I can't be you. And in today's world, with video is becoming increasingly important. I really cannot be you on video. I cannot be Nikki. I cannot be Lisa. So we need to work together differently. And even if you're able to outsource, you're still going to have to play a role in your social. And maybe that's good news. Maybe it's bad news for some listeners. But you are your business. And
Right.
that's who people want to see and hear from.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the thing, what I get a sense of when I look at social media and what people are doing is that the thing that makes you different, or that makes me different from every other technical editor, is me, and people want to know
Mm-hmm.
about me and what I bring specifically to working together. And I think that there is a lot of pressure for that to really come through in your
Mm.
social media.
Yeah, I mean, all of you probably know the expression people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And I do think from a small business perspective, that is something you can work to your advantage. And, I've followed Nikki, your social media journey for quite a while now. And I can tell you, full disclosure, I am not a knitter, I'm not a crocheter, I am not a technical editor. But what stands out to me from your content is when you post pictures of your daughter modeling what you've created, or just even behind the scenes footage of you actually doing the work that you do, and talking a little bit about why you do it. It's not necessarily what you're selling, it's kind of the other surrounding pieces of content that have intrigued me and wanted to connect with you more. And I feel that, if we look at I probably am not your ideal customer, but people that are your ideal customer, those are the things that they're building a connection and a relationship with you because you're sharing other aspects of what it is that you do.
Well, thank you for following me, even though
Well, I like you.
I like you too.
It's
Um,
always great when our business partners in a way, because Nikki and I are partners even though we're individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and our social media marketer is a partner because we're separate businesses. But it's great when we can be friends too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Isn't that why we went into business for ourselves in the first place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, behind every small business is somebody who wants to build community, wants to build the relationships. And, obviously at the end of the day, the money does matter. You are selling something as well. But, at least in my experience, the businesses that I've worked with, it's not just about the sales, it's about building the community. And, actually I just talked about this on my own social media last week, but the small businesses I see, they're probably some of the most generous business owners out there. And especially during the pandemic when, times are pretty tough, and they're still tough right now in terms of the economic climate. They do use their social platforms to bring a voice to others in the community and to support one another. Big businesses don't really do that as much. And I think
Right.
that's pretty awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
we had a really great example of that recently. One of the companies that does a lot of yarn shows, Stitches, you heard about this, right, Lisa? Stitches West and all of those shows
Yes.
went bankrupt. And so all of these small business yarn vendors um, lost, their booth fees for the shows that are coming up. And that's a big investment for them. So
And
I've seen,
the teachers that lost the income from those classes because
Mm.
Stitches was collecting it on their behalf.
right. So what
I
I've
know
seen
some of
happen,
them are still going ahead with the classes via, like Zoom and those kinds of things, but they're not being paid now because the fees went somewhere else.
but what I've seen happening, which is really great, is magazines, online knitting magazines like Knitty, are offering free ad space to these businesses to help them to promote themselves and recoup some of their costs.
Mm.
Yes. Yeah,
That's awesome.
the communities really come together trying to support those people who did lose in that, because it's important. We've got to work together.
Hmm.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And if we don't work together as a community, we're going to be missing so many things that we love, right? I can speak to, my area in the Toronto. There's a lot of bricks and mortar businesses that, will be struggling soon in Canada. There are some repayments coming up. that were handed out during the pandemic to keep businesses afloat. And I'm starting to see more and more on social, can people support us? Can people come visit? And really champion what we're doing, because these businesses are at risk of probably disappearing from our communities, which is a real shame.
Well, and
Mm-hmm.
here in the US, we've got some very large businesses that are going under
Mm,
for basically the same reasons. Brick and mortar just has become a secondary way to shop in many ways, thanks to the pandemic. And they're really seriously struggling. And, we've lost some of our biggest chains in the last year or so.
wow.
It's weird how this economy is affecting everyone,
Yeah, I
absolutely
know.
everyone. So, anyway, to get back to
Yeah, there was something that I wanted to circle back to when we were talking
Hmm.
about, small businesses or even single person businesses with limited time to devote to social media. What would be, if you had to pick one, what would be your number one platform to focus on?
I saw this was in your questions, and I would say it really comes down to your audience, right? Like I can't tell you what platform is best for your business. If we work together, I could, but it's more, you've got to be where your community hangs out, and where you can connect with them, and build those relationships. I would imagine that for the communities that both of you are in, Instagram could be a great place. But that said, Pinterest, it isn't a traditional social media platform. It is a search engine.
Mhm.
Some people confuse social for Pinterest, but it has aspects of that community building, but not as much as like Instagram or Facebook, and LinkedIn. But Pinterest is probably a great way to get the word out, because people are searching. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I always like to think about is, where are people trying to find the information that you provide? And I can see people going to Pinterest and typing in knitting patterns, right? And then they can pin the visuals that they see, and hopefully then bring themselves over from the platform to your website if you have one. And that's something that I'm a really big believer in. It's, you're on borrowed ground with social media, and you're at the mercy of platform changes, right? You don't control what they do. And, obviously they're in the business of us using their platforms and wanting people to stay within the platform. But one of the things that I work with businesses on is, how do you convert over to your website or get people on your email list? Because if social media was to disappear overnight, would you still have access to your database, your clients or your customers? And for some businesses, unfortunately, they put all their eggs in the social media basket because it's shiny, and maybe it's fun to do, but you need people's emails, websites still.
Yeah, certainly we've seen, people get hacked and
Hmm.
they lose access to their account and they don't have any way to communicate that to their followers. They're just gone. So I was taught very early on to try to build up an email list as well, because that's a direct connection to
Mm.
the people who are interested in what you're doing.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I think I struggle the most on that platform from the fact that I don't know what to write about
On what platform?
on on email lists.
Mm.
It's
Well,
like, how do you come up with regular topics that aren't the same thing over and over again?
well, Lisa, now you know the answer to that because now we know how to use AI and chat.
Uh, don't go there too much, I'm going to say. It's a great tool. I think we're in the infancy of AI content related tools, and there's ways to use it responsibly. But I would say, to what you just described, nobody knows your content like you know your content. And I think that we forget that, one, say you posted on social media, only 10% of your audience is at most going to see that piece of content. So there is no harm in actually you transferring that over to an email newsletter. And it's something that I actually do every week. Is I have a weekly newsletter, and I pull over content that I've written on my social platforms. Nobody's complained. Maybe they notice. I don't know. But it's an easy way to sort of to build that out. And I think one of the things that you could do from an email perspective is really just do a rinse and repeat. Like, how do you want to structure it? Where each week you can kind of just plug and play. So maybe it's a tip a week, maybe it's a resource that you want to share, maybe it's a community member that you know that you want to give a shout out to. Keep it simple, and you can just grow from there.
You've given me 3 great ideas right there.
Okay.
So I wanted to delve a little bit into since you're not part of the knitting community,
No.
what type of businesses do you tend to work with the most? What
Mm, any
what is their
businesses
subject
actually.
area or their sales area? Is it
Hmm.
do you have product related businesses, service related businesses?
Hmm.
What arena do you work with the most often?
Um, it's a spectrum. So since I've done this, I've worked with cooking schools, I've worked with restaurants, I've worked with interior designers, with travel advisors, um, baby sleep coaches. I've worked with photographers. It's all kind of, there's nuances to every industry, but I think when you're in the creative industry, which is what I would say both of you are in, there's similarities that can kind of be transferred over in terms of how people like to find information and things that you should be doing. You know, social media is great because it's free user research. Like, you could be on your stories on Instagram asking polling questions, engagement questions, and taking that data to actually build out better content. And it's free, which is great, you
Right.
know? Um,
When you start with a business, how much effort do you have to put into learning what the business is before you can figure out what best social media strategy
mm,
works for that industry?
Yeah. So, if we're working, say, on a comprehensive strategy, what I start with is what I think is a fulsome discovery session. And I'll guide you through some questions around goals and, your audience, and, what are some things that would mean success for you in the coming year when it comes to social. And I think one of the things that doesn't happen a lot in my industry is, there's a lot of social media strategists out there, and I know what I do, who I am, isn't for everyone. I don't believe in hacks or growth, quick fixes or follow for follow, those kind of games. That's not my thing. Some do believe in that still. I think you really do need to look at your business goals, right, and marry them with your marketing goals. And so that is something what we spend a lot of time on, is we actually look at what is it like, where are you at in your business, and what are some goals over the next 6 to 12 months, and then your social media goals and your other marketing platform goals should be actually integrated into that. And I do steer clear. One of the things I always hear of, like, what's your goal? 10,000 followers. It always comes up. I want to hit 10,000 followers. And I think still people feel like this magical floodgate is going to open up when you reach that 10,000 to 10,000 follower amount. But really, that's not a smart goal. What are you going to do with those 10,000 followers? Are they even going to be buying from you? And it goes back to, like, yes, you care about community, but you're also in the business of making money too. So we need to figure out what that looks like.
Wow, I really like what you just said there because I actually have a spinner and weaver that I
Mm-hmm.
follow and I've had contact with this person through my spinning life in the
Mm-hmm.
past, and she, a while back, had a video go viral, and people
Mm.
that would normally never follow her saw this video, and it just went crazy. Well, it affected her algorithm so badly, she had to literally
Mm.
stop posting
Oh.
until the algorithm got back to normal,
Mm,
because it was hiding her posts because they weren't reaching that same level.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's there's a double-edged sword with the going viral, right? Like I don't think that's really the goal for most people now, like to go viral. Um I'll talk a little bit about TikTok here. Like there's some businesses that I'm connected with who say they have a couple thousand followers on Instagram, but on TikTok, some of their video views are in the millions, right? That's amazing. But their other video views are like at 100 or 200 views. So kind of what you just described, Lisa, of like what is the value, what is the conversion, um, and I think a lot from a TikTok perspective, when people are using that app, they're just scrolling up and down, right? They're looking at video after video. So a video might get views, but what action are people actually taking next, right? So are those 2.1 million people actually going to go and follow you elsewhere? Are they going to check out your website? Probably not. So what does it really mean at the end of the day that you got 2 million views? It's probably a good dopamine hit, but not much else.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, like you said.
I'm afraid
So
of TikTok. I've never tried it. I heard that it's not necessarily secure, so I wasn't willing to put it on my phone. I don't know if this
Hmm.
is a myth that you want to dispel, Kirsten.
I mean, TikTok has been in the news a lot. What I'll say is, like, I'm not a privacy lawyer, I'm not a data privacy person, but we do hand over data every day, um, because we want access to things. We want access to our bank accounts, we want access to apps. Probably all of us have apps on our phone that we wanted to sign up for and just clicked, yeah, accept all. Do you actually really know where your data is going? TikTok is in the news a lot because of who owns TikTok and where it comes from. And actually, it is quite interesting if you do a bit of research into what the version is that they provide in mainland China versus here. It's quite different from what I understand. Like here, it's very much about keeping, a younger audience on the app versus over there, it's more educational.
Hmm.
I think they are up to probably some games, but at the end of the day, where do any of us really know where our data goes fully? I would say probably not,
I have
unfortunately.
my husband is actually a network administrator, and security is a big part of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And so social media is it gives him the creeps. Let's
Yeah.
just use those words. It's the easiest way to describe it. And as a result, because of, you know, his feelings about it, I have certain limitations,
Mm,
about posting pictures of the kids,
yeah.
and I've never ever ever shared his or the kids' names,
Mm,
that sort of thing, because he also works in a field that if his data is released, which it has been, unfortunately,
mm,
by the federal government, believe it or not, it could affect his work life.
yeah.
And so it's a real balancing act
Mm,
to post the, like you said, that personal side,
mm.
right? And protecting the other part of that personal side.
Yeah, it's a very tricky thing. And as a parent, I have two kids, one who's just turned 9 and one other one that's turning 5. When I first met Nikki, I had created a website for women in the Toronto area to connect them with things to do when they were on maternity leave. And I was much more open with sharing of my kids' lives at that time. And now, over the years, I've really pulled back around what it is that I share for a couple of reasons. One, privacy, what you just described. And, there's people out there, unfortunately, that do bad things. But the other reason, especially for my daughter, you know, her age group is starting to use technology, and unfortunately kids are mean, and I don't want something that I've posted of her to come up when she's a teenager. Like, it's crazy to even think about this, but I could see it happening. You know, the cyberbullying has already started at the age of 8, I would say.
Oh, my daughter, it, and it wasn't even cyberbullying, it was in-person bullying, and it was by an adult. And
Hmm.
it happened when she was around 10 or 11. And it has affected her.
Mm-hmm.
It changed her personality. It literally, she did a complete 180.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to add cyberbullying to that would just absolutely,
Yeah,
I don't,
it's a horrible thing to think about, but you know, it's funny, like the more I get out of the baby stage and the kind of that new mommy stage that happens, like the mom influencer, I I wonder where it's all going to go, because you cannot keep posting your kids in that way. Um, you know, maybe it's making you money right now, but what's going to happen to them when they enter middle school?
Yeah.
right.
Um,
Yeah, and that was something that we thought about from the very beginning. Like you said, I do have some pictures of my
mhm.
daughter modeling designs that I've created, but that's it. I haven't really shared anything of her life
No,
other than just her as a
Yes.
model.
And
And
I don't think
people,
I've ever seen her name on social media
no.
either.
I don't think so. And I mean, I think people connect the dots. It's obvious that it's my daughter because she looks
She
like
looks
me.
like you, yeah.
Yep.
but other than that, I've really tried not to share too much without her permission while she's not old enough to give it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's important. I mean, there's somebody I know, you know, through social, and I know what street she lives on. I know where her kids go to school. I know they were out looking at the ice cream truck last night. Like, I can tell exactly where they live. And she has a public account. I would, if I was her, I would reconsider some of that
Yeah,
content.
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Exactly. You've got to think safety.
Hmm.
We have gone everywhere.
All the way, all the way. Yes. Yes. As I
Repayments of loans.
but that's the best part. That's the best part of doing this is the fact that we get to have these conversations.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we talked about the newsletter. I find this format right here,
Hmm.
podcasting and talking to people and sharing ideas, so much easier and so much more complete because I
Hmm.
get to let my mind go where the conversation has gone.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Here's
I'm
a
not doing it alone. I'm not talking to myself.
here's a
No.
newsletter idea for you, Lisa. You could summarize what we talk about in the podcast and send that out, and that would bring people in to listen.
Actually, the show notes are always shared via email. So the day the podcast is released, anyone on the email list will get a copy of the show notes, which includes links that the interviewee has shared with us so that
Hmm.
if they have more questions, they can email direct to that person, or they can contact the podcast through the podcast email, Nikki or I, and share ideas. And so, yes, I do a newsletter in that manner. So I do a newsletter twice a month alongside the
That's
podcast.
awesome.
So yeah, that
I mean,
I do that.
yeah. No, you do a lot. I think that, you know, and this might sound strange. Like, I've built up, I think, more of a name for myself on social media, because that's what I offer smaller businesses that I work with. But I do have a day job and I work fully in digital marketing. The one businesses I won't work with are healthcare, because I do that in my day job life. So I don't touch that. But you shouldn't force content or to be on something that you aren't comfortable with, right? Because then it's going to feel like a chore. And, the right marketing mix for you might look very different than for somebody else, right? And we haven't even talked about YouTube. So similar to Pinterest, that's probably where a lot of people are going and typing in knitting patterns or crochet tips or something like that. And, simple tutorial videos are probably a great thing for this community as well, is what I was thinking before we hit record today. So I think
Yeah.
it's about figuring out how to be smart with your time, and where you want to put your energy and where is the most value for the people that you're connected with.
And it's kind of interesting because I do post this podcast on YouTube. There are those people who would rather listen to it there, even though
Mhm.
it's not a visual. We don't record any of the video,
I was going to
mostly
ask, I was like, I was like,
mostly
oh,
mostly because if you looked at my background, it's a mess. Okay. It's a disaster.
And I look
My
like a troll
crafting
under the
life is
stairs today.
my crafting life is all over this house. I my husband does complain just a little bit.
oh.
But that, and when I started the podcast, the last thing I needed was an additional editing
Hmm.
process that had to be gone through, and video editing is a big deal.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
That said, since I started the YouTube for the podcast, I've added some things from my weaving life and
Hmm.
my knitting life, and it's been really interesting to watch what's happened to my YouTube account,
Mm.
or I should say our YouTube account, because Nikki, it's technically partly yours. So if you want to share videos, there is a platform there.
Great.
Throw that out there. Um, it's been interesting to watch how that's changed the dynamic of that account.
But that is a
Mm.
And
great point, I would say, Kirsten, for our audience is the short YouTube tutorials. I see them in just about every pattern that I edit. They're very, very popular for learning new techniques, new knitting techniques. Um, so that would be a great way to just a great idea for content
Mm.
that's relatively simple. A lot of the videos are quite short, not a lot of production
Mm.
required.
Yeah. I know you also had a question about LinkedIn.
Yes.
Um, so it does go back to your audience, right? Is your audience there? I would say for me, LinkedIn is a more professional community. So they might not be looking to consume knitting tutorials on the platform. But I actually was speaking to somebody last week, and she has a business, and she's used it to create collaborations through direct message. So maybe there is an opportunity. I think it was Nikki, you had a question about how to use LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe it's thinking about it a little bit differently. It's not about posting in the feed content, but are there any, distributors or companies that you would love to be collaborating or networking with? Maybe it's a conference. And, this person said she's had a lot of success with just even reaching out via direct message.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I did want to ask about LinkedIn because I have a day job like you,
Mm-hmm.
although I don't do it during the daytime. I take X-rays at a hospital, so I have a LinkedIn that's related to my career as an X-ray technologist. And I always wondered, like, should I have one for my freelance business too? As a freelance editor, would that be a good place to network? And then I kind of got stalled because I thought, well, do I put that together with my other completely different resume, or is this like, should I have a separate account for that?
On LinkedIn, I think you would have to integrate it. I don't think there's any harm in putting in your profile like freelance editor and describing what it is that you do. But I wouldn't necessarily start you want to be smart with your time. Like, you're busy, you're a mom, you've got an important day job, you're doing this as well. Where do you want to put your effort in terms of the content that you produce, and where are people going to interact, engage, and share it with their own networks? I wouldn't, obviously can't say for sure. I would say that LinkedIn's probably not the place where I would think about looking for that type of content, or where people would be looking for that type of content.
Yeah, and I can't really even imagine like what kind of content people are creating on LinkedIn other than, a resume and looking for
Hmm.
people to add connections with.
Yeah,
But
it's LinkedIn's opened up, I would say, a lot in the last few years. You know, it's changed its own culture, and some people are a lot more open with, mental health struggles, what it's like to be a working parent. Like, I see a lot of content with that from people I wouldn't have seen that from 3, 4 years ago. People are a lot more vulnerable and authentic. But it's still a lot of, sharing of articles, Wired, Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, like anything that's going to make people sound important. They share it there because, the goal for most people using that platform will be to further their career, I would say.
yeah. And do you think that prospective employers are receptive to that increased vulnerability on, what I think of a LinkedIn profile, I think of a resume.
Hmm. I think it depends. I know some people who love it, and I know some people who hate it, who really don't think there's a place for that type of content on LinkedIn. I would say that you always need to be careful. What do you Basically, all of us are creating our own personal brand online, whether you're on social media, whether you're building out a newsletter, whether you've got a website. So how do you want your personal brand to come across? And let's face it, people are nosy, people are going to Google you, people are going to look you up. And so at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what content do I want associated with my name? um, because 5 years from now, both of you might be doing something different. Not saying that you are, but like, what do you want your digital footprint to look like when someone types in your name?
Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting in my case is when people type in my name, they don't necessarily find me
Hmm.
Hmm.
because my name is so common.
Is it an author?
I'm
I feel like
sorry?
I feel like there's an author named Lisa Conway. I could be wrong.
I it's not impossible. Believe it or not, when I moved back to Alaska
Mhm.
in 2009, there was a second Lisa Conway in Anchorage.
Wow.
And then there was another one that was another woman who was Leslie Conway. So the the crossover, I mean, I would go to the doctor's office or the hospital or anything like that, and they would have difficulty separating me from the other Lisa
Hmm.
Conway. And
That's
at one
terrible.
point, our medical records actually got crossed
Oh,
over,
wow.
and
Oh
it
no.
was a mess. Now, I never met her in person, and she has since moved, and I don't know to where, but oh my gosh, what a nightmare. So if you type my name in, you're not going to find me. So I have to push the business name
Hmm.
because it's more unique.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
My name is not unique enough
Hmm.
to, especially in my age range.
yeah. I just Googled you and I got Lisa Conway, Canadian musician, vocalist, and composer.
Hmm.
There you go. Yeah, it's really tough because my name is not unique enough to find me via my name.
Hmm.
When I Google myself, I get myself, but I don't know if that's just because it knows that it's, something that I'd be
Yeah.
interested in based on other things that I've searched for,
Hmm.
right?
The only browser I have open is the one we're using, so I'm not gonna
Yeah.
risk it.
Google is smart. And depending on where you're searching from, it will try to match. One of the things it tries to do is match local results. So I imagine if Lisa was to type in her name, it might be a different, like,
Oh, that's
top
right.
10 search results page.
Yeah, she might not get a Canadian singer-songwriter because
No,
she's not in Canada.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up my phone, guys.
you're gonna Google yourself.
I am
Everybody
going to
should
Google
Google.
myself because you should check. Nope, I got Canadian musician.
No,
Oh, look at that. It's because your
well,
phone,
see,
And then I got ceramics professor.
I
mm,
was going to say it's because your phone was listening to us talking about the Canadian
Well,
musician.
I swear to God that happens on social media all the time. Um, but no, the second one that came up was a ceramics professor at the
mm,
University of
yeah.
Alaska.
Oh, there you
I
go.
That must have been the Lisa Conway that I got confused with at the medical office because yeah.
And meanwhile, I got somebody who works in equity at a business development office in Toronto.
Ah,
I got Lisa Conway, psychologist in Illinois,
Yeah.
occupational therapist.
hey, Lisa, go back to your other browser tab. We got to get back on topic here.
Anyway, yes,
I'm
that
just
isn't that
teasing.
isn't that interesting? So like I said, my name is just one of those that I don't necessarily come to the forefront. So I have to think in terms of that and make sure people are aware of the business name so that they're Googling the business name
Mm.
instead of me, right? That's it's you have to think of those things.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to think about these days.
Although I will say years and years ago, what year would that have been? It was back in the 90s actually, 1990s. Yeah, clear back then. I did have an old school friend find
Hmm.
me through the internet, and we hadn't been in contact in over 20 years. So at one point or another, there was a way.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say most people are. I consider myself a master Google searcher. And so, like, I always put parameters in if I'm like trying to do some detective work.
Right, right. Well, and he would have definitely been a Google master because he worked in the industry. So, you know,
Yeah, he knows the keywords to plug in.
yeah, exactly. Going back to LinkedIn,
Hmm.
I didn't even realize that it was a social media platform.
Yeah, it's
I
probably
th-
was the
I
most
always
boring one.
saw I saw always saw LinkedIn more as a job search
Hmm.
kind of platform. Now, I've been made aware that it's not over the last year or so,
Yeah.
and I have
Oh, just hold on a second. Sorry. My sorry about that. I was not
that's quite
expecting.
all right. We have families.
Hmm.
And here in the US it's actually a holiday. So
Oh,
my
yes, it's your
entire
big
family
holiday.
my entire family is in the house. Thankfully, they know when I'm recording and it's be quiet for
Yeah.
mom.
Oh,
Keep
yeah.
the dogs out of the room.
Yeah, our holiday was a week ago,
Hmm.
Victoria Day, and there was no way I was going to get a quiet house on Victoria Day, so that's why we picked
No.
today.
That no, this was perfectly fine. But when did LinkedIn become viewed more as a social media platform than just like a job search platform, or has it always been?
I think it's always been considered a social media platform. My theory with LinkedIn is that the pandemic has been the best thing that's happened to that platform, going because it's made people open up more. And if you think about it, it mirrors, in Canada at least, all of us were sent home third week of March, and we began working remotely for quite a number of years. I mean, I'm still remote at this point in time. And, the day after we went remote, like my house wasn't set up. I had my kids home. All of a sudden I'm on like conference calls, and I've had to let people into my life, into my bedroom, literally, because that was the only quiet place in the house that we had at the time. And that sort of made people more human in the corporate world, I feel. And then that's transferred over to LinkedIn. And I think that's what we're seeing. And so, what
Okay.
will happen when people go back to the office more, I don't know, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm not going to share that about myself again.
Well, I love the idea of thinking about um, who's on LinkedIn who might want to work with me. Are bigger yarn companies on LinkedIn that might want to work with me? Are book publishers on LinkedIn that might want to work with me? And obviously the audience is probably different from who I'm connecting with on Instagram.
Mhm.
Um, but that could open up a whole new range of opportunities for a business like mine that I hadn't really considered.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we talked about this.
Yeah, it's an idea. I would, if you want to take a look at it as a platform to focus on, I would probably recommend doing some research first and seeing if those companies are on there.
Mhm.
You mentioned books. I will say that Bookstagram and like Book Talk, like that seems to be where a lot of the, I would say, more niche publishers are hanging out more and more, because in a way TikTok has been one of the best things that's happened to the book industry, because people are talking a lot about the books that they read, and smaller authors are using it as a platform to get their word out about their books.
Oh, that's really interesting.
I mean, if you
Yeah,
go
that
to
is
our main
interesting.
bookstore, Indigo, which Nikki will know,
Mhm.
there's a book table that will be like book talk recommendations. They're
Oh,
not the
wow.
best books in the world, I will say, but it's it's done quite well, I'd say, for the book industry.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't been inside an Indigo in a while because I mostly shop online
Mm.
now. So,
Yeah, our nearest bookstore is an hour away.
Oh.
wow.
There's a very small bookstore that's in the town, in a town over on the other side of the valley
Mm,
from me. That is a really lovely bookstore. I love their stuff, and I love the fact that they have a very inclusive idea of who they're marketing to.
mm,
They carry a wide range of the LGBTQ books that you don't
mhm,
see in the bigger bookstore per se.
mm. That's great.
Um, and they uh, have a mix of new and used that is a really good balance. It's a really, really lovely little store, but it's little. It's
Mm,
very, very tiny. So their stock has to be very limited. Um, and then there's a used bookstore that's about 45 minutes away, but they kind of are the um, mass produced paperbacks.
mm,
It's really limited for um, different genres and that sort of thing. So that I don't shop in there very often. And then of course, like I said, the one actual chain bookstore is an hour
mm.
away. So
Yeah.
bookstores bookstores are not a common stop
No,
necessarily, except for twice a year.
I see. Yeah.
Does your local yarn shop have books?
No.
No.
Hmm.
And
Um, actually, there's now three. There's one in my town. There's one at the in that's in Eagle River, 45 minutes away, and there's one in Anchorage. And all three of them have the two that used to. Um, they don't carry much of any in store
Mm,
anymore. They strictly. I don't know if they both do the Ravelry pattern
Hmm.
sales.
Right, right.
Because local yarn stores can sell Ravelry patterns, and they get a portion of the fees.
Mhm.
So I know one of them does. I'm not sure if they both do.
Yeah,
But the one local to me here in town is just not tech savvy enough even for that.
yeah. I spoke to a small independent book publisher about a year ago about doing a book of knitting patterns, and I was told that it's tough to sell a book of knitting patterns right now. But I have seen some recently coming out, like La Bien Aimée,
Hmm.
neons and neutrals, that are really really popular. And so I think people do want to buy books of patterns as well as just individual patterns. Um, but it's
I think it
Hmm.
it really is maybe slowly coming back, but you have to offer more than just a pattern in it. It's got to be a technique tutorial as well.
it's got to be something really unique that we haven't
Or there
necessarily
has to
seen
be a story
somewhere
along
else.
with it, like the
Mhm.
Kate Davies, who um, she has patterns, but they're all related to her Scottish surroundings,
Hmm.
and there's stories about each, you know, connected to each pattern idea. So it's got to be more than just patterns for it to really do well, I think.
Hmm.
Mhm, mhm.
Hmm.
So TikTok, eh? If I get on TikTok, I'll be able to publish a book.
Maybe. Um, okay, ladies, I have room for one last question, and I got to get back to the day job,
I
unfortunately.
hear you. I hear you. What would you say are some of the biggest social media mistakes? I know we've touched a little bit on
Hmm.
that, but I'd like to go just a little bit deeper if we could.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make still is they think everything needs to be perfect. Where, I actually imagine probably members of your community can relate to this is that, they wouldn't necessarily want to publish a tutorial if it wasn't exactly how it was supposed to be, right? Um, so I think where you can is to give yourself a little bit of grace and kindness, and not everything needs to be perfect. So, don't be scared to press share on something if it's not 100% perfect. The other mistake that I see people still making is they get wrapped up in thinking they need to be somebody else online. That dreaded imposter syndrome where you see, somebody else doing it this way. And if I was to do it this way, maybe things would be different. Maybe I would get closer to my goals. And for me, let's go back to the people buy from people. So don't be scared to be yourself. There's a community for you, and the content that you put out is unique to you, and that's going to connect and relate to an audience. There's more than enough room at the table for everybody.
So it's okay to post a picture of myself no makeup
Oh yeah.
because this girl does not wear makeup.
Yeah, totally fine.
All right. Nikki,
Thank
did
you
you have
so.
any last quick?
No, I just wanted to thank Kirsten. You've given us so much to think about here, and I'm really going to be looking at ways that I can look at some of these platforms a little bit differently,
Hmm,
and see how I can leverage them in my business. Thank you again.
awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It's been great talking to you both.
Thank you. And Kirsten, would you please share where our listeners can find you?
So if you're on Instagram, I'm at Perfectly Imperfect Social. So you can see I'm not a big believer in keeping things 100% perfect. It's my handle. And then my website is perfectlyimperfectsocial.ca.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning and taking time away from your day job to be
Oh,
with
all
us.
good. It was a nice way to spend my lunch. So
All
thank you.
right. You have a great day.
You too.
On the next episode, Nikki and I will be chatting about grading myths. To get show notes directly to your inbox, sign up for the newsletter at the newsletter link on arcticedits.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you listen, and join the conversation in our Ravelry or Facebook groups. For technical editing, find Lisa at arcticedits.com and Nikki at handknitsandhuga.com.